And and whenever you want to get started, I'll just mute myself and
Okay. Goodness. So nobody else is definitely nobody else is coming. I can't remember the number of um, the session. Melchama normally says this is session number so and so, and
I
I don't remember what the number is.
I think it's 48. If you want to say 48, okay, and don't worry, because I could always cut it out if it's not right. Because one time Nechama said the wrong number and I had to cut it out. So, it doesn't matter. If you want to say
Okay.
the number, it's okay. So,
Okay.
so all right, I'll hide myself and you, and then all they'll see is just the a print. Okay, and you could start whenever you want.
Okay. So this is session number 48, which is the last few lines of the book Der Knecht by Bashevis Singer. Es hat nicht lang gedauert und der Guff hat genommen Geusessen. It didn't take very long and his body began to die. Hat geatmet schwer und gefochert wie a Bloßsack. His breathing was difficult, heavy, and he wheezed like a bellows. Hat gemurmelt abgerissene Wörter in Yiddish Loschen und in Polish. He mumbled detached words in Yiddish and in Polish. A while hat ausgewiesen, as is tot. For a time it appeared that he was dead. Aber wenn a Chevra Kadisha man hat zugelegt a Federal zu die Noslöcher, hat sich es geriert. But when one of the Chevra Kadisha people placed a little feather at his nostrils, it moved. The feather moved. Der Guff hat auf sein Steiger sich wiedergestellt, dem Gesar von Teut. His body, in its own way, refused the decree of death. Hat geprüft, kommen zu sich, wieder anheben, verdrehen, haben Stuhlgang, Maschtin sein, Grebzen, schwitzen. His body, no, he tried to come round, once again to turn himself, to have a bowel movement, to urinate, to burp, to sweat. Aber durch seinen Gewinn die Zappelnischen von einer gekeulerten Behema. But these were the jerks of a slaughtered animal. Das Blut hat gerieselt pamelig, gegliedert. His blood trickled slowly as if frozen. Das Herz hat gepocht wie a halb abgerissene Fliegel. His heart beat slowly, literally waved, like a half torn off little wing. Wie wohl es hat gebrennt a Licht, haben die Augen recht mehr nicht gesehen. Even though a candle was burning, his eyes no longer saw. Das Flemmel von Leben hat gezankt. The little light of life was flickering. Jener von der anderen Seite haben schon gewahrt auf Jakoben. Wie die Leid, was begegnen a Korov, was kommt on auf ein Schiff. Sie haben herübergerufen zu ihm von der Land, wo sie haben sich gefunden, ausgestreckt zu ihm die Hand, ihm gegeben Zeichens von dorten. Aber wie lang die Schiff hat nicht geankert, ist noch als geblieben a Zwischenshade. Those on the other side were already waiting for Yankov, like people who came to meet a relative who was arriving on a ship. They called out to him from the land where they were standing. They stretched out their hands to him. They gave him signs from there. But as long as the ship hadn't anchored, there still remained a separation. Jakob hat gesehen stehen Sorren neben Zeldeleien. Und wiewohl die Gedanken seiner haben mehr nicht gehört zu der Erde, hat sich a while gechiddischt. Yankov saw Sora standing next to Zeldeleia, and although his thoughts no longer belonged to the earth, the land, he still wondered. Nu, dort seinen andere minhagim. So over there are different customs. Der Guf ist gestorben, aber Yankov ist gewinner so verton mit jener, was seinen ihm gekommen mekabel ponim sein, als hat recht sich nicht umgeguckt auf zurück. His body had died, but Yaakov was so engrossed with those who had come to welcome him that he couldn't really turn back. Die Schiff hat schon geankert. The ship had already anchored. Hat übergelost das finstere Kämmerl, die Schmattes und die Mist, was ist dort gelegen. He left behind the dark little room, the rags and the garbage which was lying there. Sollen das opreniken die Matrosen, jene was bleiben auf der Schiff und müssen von Snai wogeln auf dem stürmerdicken Jam. Let the sailors clean everything up, those who were remaining on the ship and needed to roam once again on the stormy seas. Yaakov, is gehat ongekommen besholem. He, Yaakov, had arrived safely. Die Chevre Kedisha Light haben getan das Zeirika. The Chevre Kedisha people did whatever they needed to do. Aufgeheben dem Meis, geöffnet die Fenster, gesagt Tziduk Hadin. They lifted up the body, the dead person, opened the windows, and they said the Tziduk Hadin, the prayer proclaiming the righteousness of divine justice, which apparently is said when a person has passed away. Man hat Jaakoven weggelegt mit die Fies zu der Tier und man hat angezündet 2 Licht zu Koppens. They placed Yaakov with his feet facing the door, and they lit 2 candles at his head. Fromme Jiden haben sich weggesetzt, sagen Tehillim. Religious Jews sat down and recited psalms. Die Idee, als Yaakov is nifter geworden, hat sich gich verspreit über die Yeshuvim Arum. The news that Yaakov had passed away quickly spread to all the towns around. Wiewohl hat gelebt in Verborgenisch und dazu, even though Yaakov had lived a hidden life and in addition verbracht die letzte 20 Jahre in Eretz Israel, hat man gewusst von ihm und von sein Hisnagus. So even though he had lived this hidden life, and in addition he had spent the last 20 years in Eretz Israel, they knew about him and they knew of his conduct. Man hat ihm gehalten für a tzaddik. They considered him to be a righteous man. Das alte Besalem, das Stickel Erd, was der Poritz Pilitski hat abgegeben zu Pilitzer Jiden, ist schon lang gewesen belegt. The old cemetery, that small piece of land which the nobleman Pilitsky had granted to the Jews of Pilitsky, had long been filled. Man hat abgegeben Yaakov en Akarka auf dem Naim Besalem, and they gave Yaakov a plot in the new cemetery. Die ganze Stadt ist gekommen zu der Levaya. The whole town came to the funeral. Man hat mit Tar gewinn die Teuten und gebracht die Mitte zum Besmedrisch. They did the purification rites for the body, and they brought the beer to the study house. Dort hat der Rov gehalten a Hesped, and there the rabbi gave a eulogy. Wenn der Bagreber hat genommen Groben für Jakob und Akever, hat die Lopete sich umgestoßen und Atzmes. When the grave digger began to dig a grave for Yaakov, his shovel came upon bones. Hat genommen Groben bedächtiger und es hat sich bald ausgeschält Guf. He began to dig more carefully, and soon there emerged a body. Ist noch nicht gewesen im Ganzen verfeuert. Efter der Fahr, weil der Boden da ist gewesen samtig und trocken. The body was not completely decayed, perhaps because the soil here was very sandy and dry. Es ist gewesen der Guf von einer Isha. It was the body of a woman. Der Scharben hat gehabt blonde Haar. The skull had blonde hair. Die Hebräische Weiber haben erkannt, als die gebliebene Begodim, die Hebräische Weiber haben erkannt an die gebliebene Begodim, as das ist von a Frau. The women of the Hebrew Kadisha recognized that what was left of the clothing was that of a woman. Es ist bald geworden allem klar, als das hat man aufgegraben Soras Kever. It was clear to everybody that they had dug up Sora's grave. Kol hat sie gehabt gelegt äußeren Besalem. The community had buried her outside the cemetery. Aber das Besalem hat sich der Nenter zu ihr und sie hereingenommen in sein Geder. But the cemetery had become closer to her and had accepted her within its border. Das Besalem allein hat gepaskend als Sora is a Yiddish Kind und a Meistor. The cemetery itself decreed that Sora was a Jewish child, Jewish person, and a pure body. Es ist geworden a Gepilder in Stott. There was a clamor in the town. Die Weiber haben geweint. The women were weeping. Teil frumme Leid haben bei sich abgepasst zu fasten. Some of the religious people decided to fast. Alle seien gekommen angucken, der Meis, was ist abgelegen 20 Jahre in Red. Und man kann noch der konnen on ihm a parsif ponim. Everyone came to look at the body, which had lain for 20 years in the ground, and they could even recognize facial features. Man hat gleich gemacht an a Sefer, und es ist geblieben, man soll makaber sein, Jakob neben ihr. Immediately they called a meeting, and it remained that they should bury Yaakov next to her. Alle haben gesehen in dem Traf die Hand von der Hashgocha. Everyone saw in this event the hand of providence, of divine providence. Also hat man getan, and that's what they did. Man hat makaber gewinn Yaakov neben Soren. They buried Yaakov next to Sora. Man hat ihm gehabt eingehielt in a Talus, weggelegt scherblich auf die Augen und ihm gegeben zwischen die Finger a Rittel, was damit soll groben sein Weg in Eretz Yisrael, wenn Mashiach wird kommen, und es wird sein Gilgul Mechilles. They wrapped him in a talus, and they placed shards on his eyes, and they gave and placed between his fingers twigs, which he would be able to use to dig his way to Eretz Yisrael when the Messiah would come. And there would be the Gilgal Mechilus, the rolling underground through the caves to the migration of the dead to Eretz Yisrael when the Messiah should come. Karl hat euch genommen auf sich zu stellen der Por a beschussfestige Matzeva, als sei zu bitten, die Soren für der Umrecht, was Gershon und seine Leid haben ihr getan. The community undertook to place a common tombstone on the grave, as if in that way to ask pardon from Sora for the injustice that Gershon and his colleagues had done to her. Der Matzeve Kritzer hat sich genommen, sich schnitzen dem Stein bald noch Schläuchim, und hat gearbeitet auf ihm ein ganz Jahr. The engraver, the tombstone engraver, began to engrave the stone immediately after 30 days after Yaakov had been buried. And he worked on the stone for a whole year. Über der Matzeva hat ausgeschnitzt 2 Täuben, was haben sich gekuscht in die Schnobeln. And at the top of the gravestone, he engraved 2 doves, which with their beaks touching, their beaks kissing. Es seien nicht gewinn kein volle Gestalten, nor Undeutungen, nicht zu verbrechen dem Verbot Leute Selocho Kolpeso. They were not um, uh, fully engraved figures, but rather suggestions, so that they shouldn't uh, uh, break the law that one shouldn't make a graven image. Unten seinen Gewinn die Namen von beiden Niftorim, Jakob ben Eliezer und Sora bas Avraham Avinu. Under these doves were the names of both of the dead, Yaakov ben Eliezer and Sora bas Yaakov Avinu. Im hat Kol gerufen Moreno Hatzadik und sie Eshes Chayil Miyimtza. The community called him our righteous teacher, and her they called Eshes Chayil, a woman who can find a woman of valor. Über die Namen seinen gestanden die Wörter Hanehovim, Haneimim, Bechayehem, Vemoisam, Lol Nifrodu. Die, was seinen geliebt in sich, ungenehmen bei Leben, und der Tod hat sie nicht zerscheit. So over the names, the following words stood. Those who were in love during their lifetime, and in their death they were not divided. And that is the end of the story.